But hey, everyone. My name is David Hamilton. I'm the founder and chairman of the America's Future Series. You are participating in the Space Innovation Summit. This summit is one of 4 events this month. This is the final day. We'll end around 4 or 5 o'clock, depending on your time zone today. We will have had 158 speakers participate between now and the end of the month. And I want to thank each and every one of them. I want to thank all of the staff, all 2 of us, my business partner, Michelle. And I want to thank the 30 volunteers that have joined the America's Future Series that helped put this together. Everything from dealing with the Zoom connectivity, putting this event on, being here at Murray Media with their studios. I want to thank all the board of advisor members, people like Rear Admiral Paul Becker, Major General Lee Levy, Lieutenant General Harry Radegui, some folks that you haven't seen, Major General Paul Kennedy. There are a whole host of folks to thank. And please, if you would visit our website and go to our team page, you'll see that, and you'll see all the people involved. We are looking for more volunteers. We are looking for other people to be on our board of advisors. We're looking for people to speak, moderate. We're looking for sponsors, of course. Everyone's looking for sponsors, and we'd love to have your firm be a sponsor of the America's Future Series. The ecosystem that we're trying to build here is a group of thought leaders, decision makers, who all care about the advancement of the United States, of it remaining the strongest military, political, and economic power in the world. These people care deeply about policy and not politics. We are a rabidly nonpartisan organization who believes that partisanship is the single existential threat we face. That if we can't find a way to work together in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation like we've seen today, and that we'll see over the course of the month, that we cannot solve, we cannot hope to approach, deal with the major existential threats that we face, including the environment, national security issues, dealing with our near peers, all of those sorts of things. And these people also believe very strongly that we must fundamentally change the way we operate, how we think, how we work together, how we're incentivized, the cultures that we create, how inclusive we are, the idea of letting the best ideas win, meritocracy, et cetera. These are all central to the people who help lead the America's Future Series. And we are looking for like-minded people to join us in our cause of helping ensure that the issues that impact U.S. global competitiveness and national security are approached in a meaningful, thoughtful, civil way, without being shy. We're not interested in what we like to call innovation or national security theater. We're interested in people who talk about solutions that have prescriptions. There are real world examples of things that can be done and are being done, or prescriptions for the future, things that must be changed. If we continue on the path that we are on right now, our near peers will surpass us. We will not be the largest economy in the world, and therefore we will not have the influence that we would like to have. We will not be able to be a bulwark or a protection, an umbrella for freedom around the world. And please understand, everyone who's watching this, that America first is to some degree our mantra, but it's not the entire mantra. We care about America along with its partners, America together. And so that's why this is the International Class Symposium, Cyber, Land, Air, Sea, and Space. And we're looking for our allies, people from other countries, to participate in these things. So please spread the word, let some folks know about this. And with that, a little bit of commercial, et cetera, I'll now turn it over to Bill Wolf. We've got Hippie with us. If we've got Hippie and the team, that's a great call sign. I wish I had a call sign. I guess closest one for me is Bird Dog, because we'll go get you some folks that you want to talk to. But anyway, I'm glad you guys are here. I'm going to turn it over to Bill Wolf of the Space Force Association, and we look forward to your very interesting and provocative conversation. Thank you so much for leading it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you having us on a panel and helping and allowing me to moderate this panel. Really do appreciate what America's Future Series is doing to spread the word, and the important word, about what's happening in the space domain. I'm honored to have with me today Steve Bucky Bateau, who is the director of the Space Portfolio at Defense Innovation Unit. He joined the team in 2015 as an early Planck owner when DIU was known as a Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, DIUX, and helped establish the organization's operating locations in Silicon Valley, Boston, Massachusetts, and Austin, Texas. Bucky, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Also, we're honored to have Chris Colbert, Chris Colbert is a manager, Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLIPS, at NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Chris, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Bill.
And I mean, that's about as much as you provided for the bio, so.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I've been around Johnson Space Center for my whole career. I've done a variety of things. I worked for Mr. Altmus for a while. I was Chief Technology Officer, and now I'm trying to champion a new way of doing business in the agency.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more about that. And then last but definitely not least, Steve Altmus, who is the CEO of Intuitive Machines, LLC. Currently serves as President and CEO of Intuitive Machines, founded 4 years ago. Intuitive Machines invents hardware and software solutions for businesses that can benefit from varying degrees of autonomy in their systems, processes, and operations. Intuitive Machines has been solving significant challenges across multiple industries, including aerospace, energy, providing solutions in intelligent autonomous systems, including complex computational modeling, simulations, and digital analytics. That's a mouthful.
That is. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks so much for being here. So the format that we're going to do today is we are going to use the clips as basically a model to open the discussion and dialogue. What has been happening in getting to the moon, and then how we can translate the successes and the innovations associated with that process and those programs, and what can national space do to help, take some of those best practices. So Bucky, we'll be looking to you to kind of fill in those gaps and those capabilities. And so what I'd like to do is just offer just a few minutes for each of our panelists to talk just a little bit about their respective organizations. So Bucky, I want to turn it over to you, please.
Okay, sure, I'll break the ice. So the Defense Innovation Unit, as you mentioned, was created 5 years ago as a way to embrace and help the Department of Defense to adopt commercial technology and use it. From when most of us were kids, the U.S. government in the 1960s and 70s was really the global leader in research and development. Today, the commercial sector is. And so if we're going to leverage the best capabilities coming from the commercial sector, from companies like those, Intuitive Machines and others participating in the CLIPS missions, we have to create an on-ramp so that we can leverage and use that technology. So DIU, we're the first, we're the only DoD-wide organization that does this. We work with all the services, including the Air Force with AFWorks, soon the Space Force with SpaceWorks, and many other programs, the Space Enterprise Consortium, and we all work collectively to try to make this transformational shift so that we're using more commercial technology. I love this mantra, came from our workshop last year, which is buy what you can, build what you must, right? So we don't want to be competing as a government with the commercial sector. We want to be embracing it and using it to that advantage. There's two programs I also want to highlight, which are subordinate to DIU. One is called the National Security Innovation Network, and this is how we bridge the gap with academia and early stage companies who are just getting started with developing ideas that may have some dual use application. And a very exciting program called National Security Innovation Capital, NSIC. That program was actually stood up by Congress in 2019, but finally got funding for the first year in FY21. NSIC is our solution to how do you get early stage funding for hardware forward companies. The venture ecosystem is biased towards software because they get greater returns on investment. So we wanted to make sure that we had some way to incentivize and get the ball rolling for early stage hardware companies. So you can go to nsic.mil, and there's an open BAA there, and put in your ideas. And so those are for those earlier stage things that or you're probably having some difficulty raising some funds. There's you've got two NASA guests here, so I won't talk about the NASA programs unless you would like me to. But I'm more than happy to talk about Tipping Point and all the wonderful. You guys make us jealous. The public-private partnerships that you guys are doing is great. And I'll tell a quick story. When NASA did the Venture Class Launch System a few years ago, They put, I think it was about $15 million in, and they got 3 companies started with small launch. Well, we rode their coattails. We came in behind and did a subsequent program and awarded small contracts to many of the same companies. And I think this is how government can work together to really, in that case, address a problem, which was there wasn't enough launch for many of the small users who were trying to get to space, and it's very successful today. But I'll pause there and wait till the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. Really do appreciate that introduction. And we are sitting here in the Ops Center of our host, Intuitive Machines. And so let me turn it over to our main guest, Steve Altemus, sir.
Yeah, so thank you. I think, for me, Intuitive Machines is a little bit different than maybe what Bill characterized in the bio. We've focused since 2018 on becoming a cislunar, a pioneering company in cislunar space. And so we initially formed the company in Intuitive Machines as a think tank to solve intractable problems across aerospace, energy, and medicine. But when there became a national imperative in early 2018 out of the National Space Council to reclaim the high ground, which is the moon, our company, having come from human space flight within NASA, decided to throw all in to go access the moon and deliver payloads for NASA to the moon. So there was a call, a commercial lunar payload service contract call for companies that were interested and capable of landing on the moon and providing data back to NASA. And it was an incredibly innovative contract that came out of NASA. Chris will talk about it more, but it gave us an opportunity to invest in ourselves, to find private capital and commingle that with public capital. And by doing that, we could innovate rapidly. And so we are now recipient of several awards from NASA to return the United States to the moon. And so Intuitive Machines is flying to the moon later this year to return the United States to the moon for the first time in 50 years. So Intuitive Machines will be first to the moon, and then subsequently in November 2022, we'll be first to land on the South Pole in the history of humanity, and we'll be the first to drill for water ice on the South Pole of the moon, and first for humanity. In addition, you mentioned tipping points. Tipping points also came through, and we did a public-private partnership with the Space Technology Mission Directorate at NASA to develop a hopper that would hop off our lunar lander and into a permanently shadowed crater on the moon. And then in addition, we have a partnership with Nokia to put the first 4G LTE communications link on the surface of the moon. So it's quite an exciting time for Intuitive Machines. Like Hippie said, we're in the Nova control room from where we will conduct our first mission to the moon later this year.
Thanks so much, Steve, and really an honor to be here in the control room. Very nice facility, and had an opportunity to go over and take a look at the build site for putting together the lander. Very interesting what's going on over there, and we're going to talk more about that here in just a few minutes. Before we do, I'd like to allow Chris to talk just a little bit about what we're doing from a commercial cargo and commercial crew program perspective, and just a little bit about CLPS and how it came to be, and really some of the big lessons learned you're taking away from the program.
So thanks, Bill. Sure, this is a fascinating time. Most of you know NASA has been in the space business very successfully for a long time. But if you've watched our history over the last 20, 25 years, missions get bigger and bigger, they get more and more expensive, they get slower and slower. We want to break that paradigm. And the agency's been trying to do that by these public partnership opportunities for quite a while now. You mentioned commercial crew and commercial cargo. Those were two earlier approaches towards utilizing more effectively what commercial entities bring to the table, the kind of innovation that Lucky mentioned, the opportunity to change things quickly. Those were reasonably successful. We've got commercial companies flying payloads to space station regularly. We've already had one take crew to the space station. We'll have another one hopefully later this year. Those are moving in the right direction. We're getting further and further down the path toward enabling commercial partnerships to support the kind of core missions that NASA wants. So we started asking the question, how can you do this outside the human spaceflight community? Science mission is another huge part of what NASA does. We're all very familiar. We've got a recent landing on Mars going very, very well. Those missions are very important. They're important to the public. They capture the imagination in very important ways. They inspire kids. These are all good things. But those missions are also long and slow. So can we take some of the innovation we've been slowly feeding into the human space flight and do it in the science community? That's what CLPS was about. Commercial Lunar Payload Services was an attempt to take what we learned on commercial cargo and commercial crew and go even further. So under CLPS, we've essentially turned over responsibility for the entire mission to the companies. We selected 14 companies to be in our pool, companies that demonstrated they have at least the beginnings of the wherewithal, both technically and financially, to do missions to the moon. We find some payloads that we want delivered, and we are basically chartering a delivery service. Call it FedEx to the moon if you want to. That's a little bit too simplistic, but the idea is we hand a payload to our customer and say, get it to the moon for us. You figure out how to do that. So they build the lander, they contract for launch services, they run the mission. These are their missions. They're commercial missions that happen to carry NASA payloads. In that process, we believe we free up innovation on their side by taking the government role even further back. This is about as light as touch as you'll ever see the government be. We don't tell them how to build a lander. I'm not even in the room when they hold their PDR and CDR. When they're designing the lander, it's their design. I'm giving the requirements for delivering my payload and leave it up to them to figure out what to do. In that process, we think we get faster pace, we think we get lower price, and we hope we get a far more innovative approach and the opportunity to fly things way more recently at lower cost. In about 2 years of execution of CLPS now, we've contracted for 6 landings on the moon, 2 per year from 21 through 23, over 40 payloads being delivered, and all of that for right around, let's call it around $500 million. Typical NASA missions, one payload would have started at that price range. So we're seeing the return on investment we'd hope to see in terms of pace, 6 missions in 2 years already chartered, $500 million for 6 missions. The one last piece we need to see, hasn't happened yet, and hopefully Steve will show it to us later this year, we need them to actually land on the moon. That last step's non-trivial. But assuming they can do that, we think we've opened up a whole new framework for how NASA can do business long-term.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. Now, General Bateau, I'm going to come back to you here in just a moment to see how we can leverage those best practices that Chris was just talking about in Defense Innovation Unit. But before that, I want to talk to Steve really about what is going on and how did you get the costs so far down? I mean, when we walked over to the laboratory and saw the assembly line and what you're doing over there, word is you're just basically finding the critical pieces and parts and putting them together to make sure you have them and basically getting that for pennies on the dollar comparatively to our normal processes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think the whole key to Intuitive Machines, which is as important as actually landing on the moon, which is historic and significant, is the disruptive pricing or cost that we can meet for building a lander and flying it to the moon. Right? It began with SpaceX's breaking the barrier for access to space and the price point for how you get to space. And once that went below $100 million, you now can start to think about missions into space at a much more affordable price, which in the end is a good goal for the whole U.S. economy, in that you can increase the science density of missions going to the moon or into outer space. You can increase the number of shots on goal, if you will, or attempts to go to the moon, like CLPS has 6 missions going to the moon. So if you can get the price point down, we can have more of a proliferation in space. And so what we've done is we are crazy enough to bid on a CLPS mission with NASA, firm fixed price to land on the moon and fly their payloads for under $100 million in 30 months. Now, who does that? I'll tell you, nobody does that. Nobody does that the way it's been done always, right? So what has to be done is you have to think differently about how you're going to execute. And the fact that you have not enough capital, you have not enough schedule, and you have an incredibly technical challenge forces innovation. Innovation doesn't come when you're overfunded and have lots of schedule, which happens in a lot of large, complex programs that are cost plus award fee with not the correct incentives that don't help you actually help the contractor actually move faster. But this firm fixed price environment to the moon is incredibly challenging. So when we look at the engineering challenge to how you're going to build a lander, how you're going to put in a mission control, how are you going to communicate to the moon, we've got to come up with different solutions. So one example that we did is we build our own liquid oxygen, liquid methane engines in-house. And we bought an investment before we even won Eclipse task order. We invested our own money into additive manufacturing. So we put on Inconel machines and titanium machines, and we print our own structures components, our own engine injectors, our own igniters, our own nozzles, and we now have an ability to produce those things in rapid fashion. And I would tell you that's an example of where we would never be able to go to the moon in 30 months if we didn't have additive manufacturing techniques. And so what we're doing is constantly innovating, looking at the latest technologies out there to help us build an end-to-end mission to the moon, right? Faster and cheaper. So you saw a number of those, Hippie, when you were out at the factory of innovative ways that we're working together. And that's in the use of additive manufacturing, generative design, how we're going to design and analyze parts and make them super lightweight using sophisticated software. I use an old muffler tube bending machine that we from a muffler shop that actually bends our propulsion tubing. But what we did was we coupled it with critical inspection software that actually inspects the tube before it leaves the tube bending machine, and I get the precision tolerances I need. So you get an old-timey $75,000 tube bending machine with a sophisticated software package, and then we have the smarts to tie it together, and you get uber dimensions on your plumbing. So a lot of those kinds of ideas and techniques that we're using to keep our schedule and keep our costs down.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. So Bucky, I'm going to turn it back over to you now to kind of draw that analog between how the DIU can help manufacture capabilities and processes as quickly as possible. I mean, give us some examples, and how are you focusing on those process improvement?
Sure, this is great. So if I was in the room, I'd be sitting right between Chris and Steve. So Chris is my partner, right? And when I look at Steve and when I look at Intuitive Machines, I don't want them to see me as the government or DoD. I want them to see me as an early adopter customer, right? So we're looking for those customer relationships. The best thing that we do, and actually what NASA does through its public-private partnership programs, as Chris described, is that we don't prescribe the solution. What we do is we present interesting or wicked problems to companies. That companies, the most innovative minds in the nation, thrive on solving the most perplexing problems, right? So give the problem to the company and tell the company, how would you solve this? So we're vested in seeing, assessing the utility of their commercial solution solving our problem. And if there's a good fit, then what we'll do is we'll figure out a way to do business with that company, either as it could be buying products, buying, in this case, services, and looking at how that transforms or modifies our thinking on the way that we used to do things, because everybody around the table work on bespoke, government-derived and developed and fielded solutions in the past, and so that's oftentimes those are in conflict with one another, because Steve has to develop a business plan and get investors and be moving smartly towards a grand vision, and the best thing we can do is ride along that, as long as our interests are aligned. If they're not, guess what? There's maybe another company they're down the street from Intuitive Machines in Houston or elsewhere in the country that can make up that other 10-20% that we need to make something that's truly unique. And so that, I think that's great. The other thing that we do is, so we look at opportunities, right? So we've had, I'm going to keep poking at Steve because he's there at the table, but we've had a couple meetings with Intuitive Machines, because guess what? They've got upmass. They're gonna fly to the moon, which is like, that's a great way for us to look at, hey, is there rideshare opportunities? are there other problems that we can solve in the course of, and this won't be the only time that that his company goes to the moon. So how do we leverage all the frequency of what they're going to be doing in the future? That becomes that mobility aspect of space logistics, which is something that we're heavily vested in right now.
Thank you. Steve, back over to you, sir. I want to talk about all the infrastructure necessary to do everything that you're doing. What in the program that you're developing, I mean, it's basically nuts to bolts. I mean, everything that needs to be done, you're doing. As Chris said, they're going to give you the payload, and you're going to get it to the moon. And so talk about the infrastructure necessary to make that happen.
Yeah, sure will. If you think about it, flying to the moon, taking payloads to the moon is like essentially building a mini Apollo program. It really does come down to building an end-to-end lunar program. And so we start with creating the structure of a program. We have a ground segment. In the ground segment includes the antennas worldwide that we went on contract with, and we put a baseband unit at every antenna. So now that we have a ground control network to actually communicate with our lander. We built a mission control center and Nova Control software to communicate with those antennas and communicate via our operators to our spacecraft. We had to build a lunar lander. We had to design and build the entire lander from scratch, which has never been built like this before. We had to build an operations team to control the operations in flight. We have to train that team. Right? And then we have to integrate with a launch vehicle and provide that launch vehicle integration all the way down to Cape Canaveral. And our launch vehicle integration partner is SpaceX in this case. So we built every brick for a lunar program necessary in the past 24 months. And now that program is instantiated and we can rinse and repeat and we can now use it. But that first investment was to lay in all of the necessary elements so that you can produce and go into production with your landers, right? You can go into production with your payload integration techniques. And, you know, we're out there selling additional payload space to customers like Bucky, and we're talking about selling extra space on the booster. So we have launch mass available to throw to translunar injection. We have landed mass available to customers that want to be on the surface, and we have orbit mass available that we can sell and partner with to put payloads in orbit. We set up a whole pricing model for how to do that, not just with the government, but commercially viable. So come to get the catalog. It's $1 million a kilogram to land at a mid-latitude location on the moon. It's $1.25 million a kilogram to land on a pole, because you need more energy, it costs a little bit more, and $900,000 a kilogram to go into low lunar orbit. So we can take payloads anywhere you need to be in that vicinity. And we can take larger payloads, 1,250 kilograms, like I said, to a translunar injection. And think about what that offers us. That offers us the ability to move and extend not only our Earth-based ground network, which has line of sight to the moon, but actually put in comm satellites that can actually see the backside and the full surface of the moon. And so now we can talk about doing missions on the entire surface. And so that's kind of what we've laid in and where we're headed to kind of open up this cislunar economy. And from the previous panel that we just heard from, I think that $10 trillion market is upon us. It's not as far out as some might say. I think once we broke the barrier, and I would say NASA was the seed money that actually allowed that to happen, it's going to take off like wildfire.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you for that. I'm going to come back to how you protect those assets when they're there, because I think that's an important concept that people need to understand. It's not just about developing the capability and getting the capability and landing the lander there on the moon, but it's also about protecting that investment and protecting those resources. So I'm going to come back to you on that. First, though, I want to talk to Chris and talk to us a little bit how the work that led to the CLIPS program as a precursor to Artemis program, and how it has built a highway on which to more efficiently develop deep space technology that benefits all sectors of the space industry?
Yeah, okay. Good topic, Bill. The agency's interests are more than just landing some science instruments on the moon. Everybody's pretty familiar with the fact that the last administration asked us to put humans on the moon by 2024. The new administration is supporting the agenda, maybe not the time frame. But we don't want to go back to the moon with humans and leave a flag this time. We want a more sustainable infrastructure. We want to do a series of missions over time that build not just an economy, but build a knowledge base and opportunity for humans to extend their presence throughout the solar system. So one of those first steps is getting the data we need to understand more about the moon. Now, we sent a lot of missions to the moon back in the 60s and the 70s. But NASA, the United States, hasn't actually landed on the moon since the 1970s. Russia stopped landing on the moon pretty much, too. China started going back again recently, but there's not as much knowledge about the moon as you would expect, given how long we've been in space. So gathering data about what goes on the moon. Steve mentioned the desire to drill on the moon to find water. One of the first things you need in a sustainable infrastructure is life-sustaining components like water. Humans can't live without water wherever they go. Water is also useful as a fuel. So if we can find water on the moon or find water on Mars, it completely changes the storyline about how you can sustain an infrastructure. So early missions to the moon, in fact, Steve will be flying one of the very first ones, will help us start finding where water is and whether we can get access to it and what it's like on the moon. It's not sitting in puddles on the moon, right? Mm-hmm. It's in the soil, it's in ice mixtures, it's in soil mixtures. We have to figure out how to get it out of the surface, out of those regoliths, turn it into something we can work with. These early CLIPS missions will have a lot to do with providing us the science and the data about what's on the moon and where it's at and how we can access it and use it. Those are some of those first building blocks for how you build up a sustainable infrastructure for doing things on the moon. And by the way, we're learning things in that process that we think we'll utilize again when we go to Mars. The Mars environment's very different, but learning how to do it closer to Earth, closer to home makes a lot of sense before we have to try similar things when we go to Mars.
Thank you for that. We are running out of time, but I do want to touch on a topic that is, I think, extremely important. There's a paper that was written last year by Mir Sadat and Bruce Kahan. The policies for the new space age competing on the final economic frontier. Bucky, I think you're familiar with that as DIU helped with the study. You know, one of the topics that they bring up, the authors bring up, is a concept of the space commodities exchange to provide new forms of financing commercial space companies like space bonds. Can you talk a little bit about that concept and if that concept is actually gaining momentum?
Sure is. So here's the thing. Chris mentioned twice talking about the moon and talked about sustainable infrastructure. You know, there's a lot to be said about space these days, but I think that one of the central themes of this meeting I've been listening to this morning is that space is an economic domain, right? The United States was an economic power 70 years before it was a military power in World War II and a global military power. And the important relevance of that is that largely that rise of the United States as an economic power is because of its direct investments in sustainable infrastructure, transportation, starting with railroads and going on to interstate highways and the airlines and all these things. Space is the only domain where humans are operating that we do not have a sustainable infrastructure for the economy. NASA is trying to do this, and what they're doing is they're showing that it's the how it is possible, and they've done that successfully. But what we need to do is we need to make direct investments, not just in companies like our launch companies, but our lander companies, and make companies in the supply chain. There's companies all across the United States that supply the materials for companies like Intuitive Machines. If we can pivot from our legacy of doing expendable systems to having more serviceable systems that sustain that infrastructure, then we're going to create new economic zones. Why is this important? Because now we're talking in the language of the economists, right? Not the science and technology folks, but the people who actually drive the financial markets. They want to see the commercialization of this great, frontier, as was mentioned earlier. And the best way to do that is to really commit today to starting out and building that infrastructure. We have infrastructure now that supports the ISS and low Earth orbit. We're committed to trying to create that logistics infrastructure to service other orbits, including GEO. But guess what? If we're at the top of the gravity well, we might as well include the moon in there too, right? So the wonderful thing is you're going to see some significant investments, so many of which have already started going on in this domain, because people are seeing the vision of the commercial sector. NASA is being a great flag leader in its pivot to public-private partnerships, and DoD is going to take advantage of that, because we can't maintain our technological advantage and our superiority for national security if we're not leveraging the best commercial technologies that are available for this new and exciting era. So there's more I can say about that, but it'll get too gleepy, so I'll just leave it there.
Well, that being said, if people want to find out more information about DIU, General Bateau, how would they do that? What's a good website for them to go to do some additional research?
Yeah, so I selfishly posted some links on the chat box there. So I posted diu.mil for DIU, that NSIC, and the Ensign websites, and we can help out if you contact us and you want information about NASA's Tipping Point program or some of the other ones, AlphaWorks, SpaceWorks. Just reach out to us and we'll hook you up.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Really do appreciate your time today. Steve, if people want to follow the progress on Intuitive Machines and everything you're doing to get to the moon, how would they do that?
So look through our website, www.intuitivemachines.com. And you'll find a big countdown clock on the web page that says we only have this many days to go, and we're working really hard to meet that date. So follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and those links are all from our website.
Perfect. Thank you, sir, for your time. Chris, if people want to follow the progress of what's happening down at the Johnson Space Center and specifically with CLPS, how would they get more information?
NASA.gov/CLPS.
Perfect.
We put all our data out there for people to see.
All right. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate everyone's time today. And for more information about the Space Force Association, please head over to ussfa.org. Thanks, everyone, for your time, and look forward to talking to you soon as this journey progresses.